And so it was me, a gentleman named Jesse Dirty, and another gentleman named Jacob Lemaire, like the horse. That's a nice horse you got there. You know what I'm saying? And we were living together in separate rooms, but together albeit. And this was after my sister and I and a young lady named Taylor were living together in separate rooms once again. And then Taylor became wed to my brother-in-law's brother. It's a fascinating mental gymnastics you have to do to understand it, but it was completely normal. And then it became my sister and I, who was in a 2-bedroom apartment. So we had a guest bedroom. And then my sister got married, and I needed roommates. Well, frankly, I didn't need roommates. I functioned pretty well on my own, but my budget needed roommates. And it worked out beautifully. So we had the young man named Jesse Dirty and a young man named Jacob Lemaire. We all lived together. This was year 4 of living in this apartment. It's colonial style, beautiful white brick. The Gainesville Ripper, unfortunately, ended some of his victims' lives at this particular apartment complex, which there's a rule. If the murder happens in a room, I believe by law, that room cannot be leased out in the future. So my understanding is the leasing office is where all of that occurred. But the Ripper has been accused rightfully, and I'm not sure if he's still alive. I don't believe he is, but he was caught, and that's a story for another time. Back to me, Lemaire, and Dirty. We got together, and we were living with one another. Well, a few months passed by, and the apartment, like I said, we've lived there for 4 years, so maintenance hasn't done anything crazy, and there's certainly things that have occurred in that apartment that were rather unfortunate, like floods every summer. Also, the apartment is halfway underground, so that kind of explains that. Bad work on the colonial side. Either way, we continue on our journey of living with one another, and we begin to notice some extracurricular activities happening in our kitchen. Well, previously, we've had lizards in our home. We've had frogs in our home. Those are common occurrences. It's like Carol Baskin, except miniature reptiles, which is not optimal. And frankly, this complex, Williamsburg Village, is getting a bad rap. But it did host me. My life, my formative years did occur in this wonderful, growing complex. Well, we start to notice these extracurricular activities, and they weren't miniature reptiles. They were rather large insects. And what it came out to be was a back and forth between myself and our leasing office. You know, I would clean the crumbs off of the counter very often, and I still noticed these insects, these bugs, and I called the leasing office. Can you please help? The leasing office comes in. Well, there's crumbs on your counter. What do you expect? And I thought to myself, if only you knew what I had been doing every single night, every single day, every single time I cook, every single time Dirty cooks, every single time Lemaire brings his girl over and they eat pizza and leave drippings of pizza everywhere. That's neither here nor there, other than the surfaces were clean. I was a little clean freak about it, unfortunately, to a sinful point, I would say. Well, anyway, I had enough, and I'm a fairly easygoing guy on the external. Internally, I'm wound up at myself. But I said, ma'am, leasing office ma'am, we've got to have a chat. Me, you, maintenance man. Let's make it happen. And she says, well, let me have a chat with you. And so she calls me into the principal's office, and the leasing man, the maintenance man is there. I say, man, I'm glad you're here. I'm actually really glad you're here. And you could just see the face. It was a very defensive manner. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I just want to say thank you for all the work you've done. And I want to explain what's been happening. So there, allegedly, I believe it. I believe he wouldn't put in the work, and me and him were great buds. But it wasn't working. And for some reason, the leasing people would not believe me when I said, look, we still have the bugs. And so we had this powwow. It was beautiful. The three of us began to weep with one another. We all walked out holding hands and smiling and skipping across the lawn. Well, they come back a week later. They say, well, here's the actual problem. Not only is your apartment underground, but our car wash system, the faucet or the hose that is connected to the car wash system at your place the pipes run through your apartment, and there's a leak, henceforth creating a warm and humid and soggy environment for these insects to come in, repopulate, multiply themselves, and attempt to take over the apartment. And it all made sense after that. They found the root cause of the issue and fixed it. And I think there's a lesson to be learned on all fronts. But one of the lessons I'm thinking of is how often we will go toward seeing an issue, and a temporary solution is for me, I need to clean the counters. I've got to clean the counters. Well, that's not dealing with the root issue. A temporary issue for the maintenance men and women is, well, maybe I'll just spray the lines of entry points that will kind of, I don't know another word other than inebriate the bug. Well, that's a temporary solution. You're not getting to the root issue. And root issues, to get to them, are often painful. They often take much more time and investigation. But one of the things, when you find the root, you rip it up, or whatever that it is, it takes tending to heal. And so you can't just rip the root out and say, all right, we found the root cause, so be it. No, you have to have action after that. So you have to rip the root out and replace it with new and fresh soil. You understand what I'm getting at here. We're not just talking about bugs. We're not just talking about the things of cleaning your home or even gardening in its most basic sense. We are talking about life. We are talking about things that draw us away from the good and toward sin. We have to find the root. If all we're doing is trying to run away from sin, we are going to fall into sin. And here's why. Because all we will think about is what I cannot do, rather than who I should become. More like Jesus is the answer. But overall and ultimately, you have to find the root cause. So one of these things, I think we talk about this on the Quite Frankly podcast quite often, is a sin in my life could be people pleasing. I fear the view of man on me more than I fear God. That is people pleasing at a basic sense. But what's the root of that? It's pride. I care more about what people think about me than what I believe that God has said about me. Isn't that fascinating? And once you can find the root and you're not just tending to the surface, but you're tending and asking the Lord to tend to the heart, to change the posture of the heart. And I think of many things, but one of the things you, the listener, have to deal with is Brett and I and Rodrigo, we have captivating personalities, but our personalities cannot be what keeps you. It has to be the content that keeps you. If all we just say is, oh, I did this past week and it means nothing, and I don't really care about the listeners, and success hinges on my 35 listeners per week. Well, that's not anything that's benefiting to you. So it's important that the Quite Frankly podcast captivates the heart of the listener, and I sure hope and pray that it does, because I believe, Brett believes, and certainly Rodrigo is the driving force of what we do, deep and generous love for one another and deep and generous love for you. So we go to this maintenance man, and we're investigating together now. Notice how he's not on his own. He has a counterpart. The three of us come together. We come up with a plan. I say, look, I'll get out there on my hands and knees. No gloves, no shoes. Whatever the Lord leads you to ask me to do, I'm in, because I want to fix the problem. I don't care about the disdain we may be having toward one another. We've got to get down to business to defeat the bugs, as Mulan said. Interestingly, we do that investigation, and we come to find out, what type of bug is it? It's the German cockroach. It really is an invasive species, one that should be extinct. A little bit about the German cockroach. The Latin term is Blatella germanica, or Germanica, dependent upon where the regions in which you hail. Colloquially, it's known as the croton bug. The croton bug. It's interesting, but it is a species of the small cockroach, typically about 1.1 to 1.6 centimeters in length. It can go from tan to black. It has two dark, roughly parallel streaks on the pronotum running posteriorly from behind the head to the base of the wings. That is a little bit about the German cockroach, and what's quite fascinating, because this did not happen with Molly, my sister, and Taylor, my sister's sister-in-law, and more importantly, my friend, and even more importantly, daughter of the Lord. We did not have the German cockroaches. We had the lizards, which is Latin for lizards. But what is important to note is the German cockroaches only showed up after Lemaire and Dirty showed up. And what's even more fascinating is that Lemaire, I believe he's Scottish of some sort. Maybe he might be German, actually. I have a little bit of German in me as well. But Dirty was full-bred Jewish. Not religiously Jewish, but culturally Jewish. And it's sad to see that the German cockroaches infested our apartment complex when Dirty became a part of the apartment complex. I'm wondering why that might be. I'm not sure if it's a coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences, as we discussed. No such thing as coincidence, only perfect plans in the sight of the Lord. So that's interesting. The German cockroach is obviously native to Europe, emerged from the region of Ethiopia and Northeast Africa. But interestingly, recent evidence indicates that it actually originated in South Asia or Southeast Asia. So I'm not sure totally what to believe, but they can occur widely in buildings, particularly associated with restaurants, food processing facilities, hotels, and institutional establishments, such as nursing homes and hospitals. And I reckon you could add a Williamsburg Village to that list. They are omnivorous, and get this, and I would say this adds up with lived experience. The German cockroach reproduces faster than any other residential cockroach, growing from egg to reproductive adult in roughly 50 to 60 days under ideal conditions. And I reckon we had the most ideal conditions. So there's something beautiful about that. They're very successful about establishing an ecological niche in buildings. So they are resilient to pest control, and I believe a study just showed that cockroaches has actually overcome pest control opportunities because of they've just built immunity over their life cycles and reproductive cycles. So that's a little bit about the German cockroach. This week, we haven't had Life Group in a while, but we did play Mexican Train, Cardinal Mexican Train. And if you haven't played that, I'd recommend it. It does take about 6 hours. We got about 1/3 of the way through. And that was beautiful. There's also something else that's wonderful that occurred. And that was on Saturday morning. This past Saturday morning, I go with some friends, Mando Bando, the Big Red Machine, Abby Bennett, and some others. Shout out to them. And we go serve our community in downtown Gainesville, our houseless friends. We serve them breakfast and a meal. We pray for them, etc. And I'm always encouraged when we go out there, not when we go out there, that was my first time going out there specifically, but serving with the houseless ministries, is these people are so broken that they can be sometimes, if they are born again Christians, more free in Christ than we are as living. We have homes, we have stable jobs, stable income. But one of the things that is fascinating and what the Lord continues to share with me and show me is that these houseless friends, albeit they are in a terrible living circumstance, a terrible living situation, their dependence on the Lord is seemingly greater, and their complete trust in Him is seemingly greater than what mine tends to be. I can rest in a comfortable job. I can rest in a comfortable home, returning to knowing when my next meal is, etc. I can have that planned out. These people, these friends, are completely dependent upon what the Lord provides. And I think that's very noticeable in how they carry themselves. That's very noticeable in how they interact with you with such kindness and generosity. And I think one of the key factors in repairing and allowing for great restoration for houseless friends is starting at the very basics. This is a child of God made in the image of God. And it's easy to dehumanize when looking out on the street. It's very easy to dehumanize or go to your next thing because you have it planned out. It's harder to put in effort to talk to people that you may not be naturally comfortable talking to, only because society has moved us toward that. Not because of what the Bible teaches, not because of what God has instilled in us, but because society and sin nature has formed us to this unfortunate view of houseless friends. And so I'd encourage you just to take a look in the mirror like I have to do with myself and say, you wretched sinner, you were made in the image of God. Your friend was made in the image of God. There's nothing that's setting you apart in the sight of God. So why are you treating them differently? And I don't mean to be harsh. I'm more so being harsh to myself. But as we said earlier, you have to find the root behind that. Find the root behind why you might be struggling with that. And I think the Lord is gracious and good to reveal that to you if you ask Him. But you have to ask Him. You have to run to the Father like you're His son or daughter, asking, how in the world do I do this? How in the world do I throw the ball? How in the world do I cook for the first time? I remember I asked my father, and I believe I was 18. This is actually quite sad for me. But I said, how do I scramble eggs? You know what I'm saying? Seemingly now, a very simple task was remarkably complicated because I had not a clue where to begin. What this requires is humility. Now, I will say my father, he likes to chef things up. He likes to add spruces and spices and condiments and hors d'oeuvres and add character and style to these things of delectable items. That's why one of the reasons that one of the things he is known for is his Epicurean delights. Well, I am not that same way, much to the detriment of my family, I'm certain. I make turkey stew that tastes like dog food. And that was one time. Don't hold it against me. It's rather unfortunate. I wouldn't recommend it. Most of my meals I can enjoy. But back to the scrambled eggs, I had not a clue what to do. And so he's talking about adding jalapenos and adding all these spices like we mentioned. And it's all about the presentation. The presentation impacts the way you feel when you eat it. And there's psychology behind that. But he showed me how to make the scrambled eggs. I had to ask him in complete humility. Now, do I make them the same way he does? No, because I'm not the same person he is, and that's okay. I'm very appreciative, but I can tell you this, my father would not like my scrambled eggs, and that's okay. And that's why he usually does the cooking whenever we're together. But back to the whole point, you have to humble yourself to ask these questions. Usually that's a way to gain wisdom, is don't rely on you having to experience everything, having to build everything from the ground up, tearing everything down before building it back up to potentially worse than what it was or to the same level that what it was. Sometimes, and this is me thinking out loud, because I like to tear things down, not humans, but I like to understand what's underneath. And for me, the easiest, most convenient way is for me to do it myself. Notice how I didn't say the most beneficial, most productive, most God-honoring way. But I think the lazy way, mentally and creatively in me, is to break things apart and build them from the root up. That is an insult to the work that has gone before me. That is not taking advantage of the experience of which someone before me has gone on. And again, I'm thinking out loud, verbally processing. But I've got to work on that, because there are things in life that you can't just tear down immediately. You have to inherit situations that are bad, and you have to figure a way out of it. And that takes humility. But the easy path is say, nope, let's delete everything. Let's get rid of everything. I'm going to do it my way, and we're going to build up. No, that's garbage, my friend. So I encourage you to grow. And I'm looking into a camera, and the camera's looking right back at me. So I'm talking to myself. Anyway, that was Saturday. It was quite beautiful. Then we get to vote. And if you don't vote, man, you're missing a great opportunity to let your voice be known. So I'm walking into the voting precinct, and everybody's so happy. They are also all over the age of 60. And that's indicative of voter involvement, I'm certain. Anyway, they are very excited. We're here. I'm here. I go look up the voting precinct. I show up, and the guy says, he's just asking my name. He talks about the year I was born. He's like, that's a great year to be born. I said, thanks, brother. And then he said, Beau Martin. He said, that's a great name, man. You should be an actor or something. And so I told him, well, how about President of the United States? You know? And we talked about the Unity Party. We want to create a nation and a world where life can flourish. And we talked about that for about 5 minutes. The line got backed up behind us. And that was okay. That was a moment to share vision behind unity. A nation in a world where life can flourish. There's something absolutely beautiful about that. And he was highly interested. I think he's going to apply for a position on the cabinet. If you're listening to this and you're inspired, I'd recommend applying as well. That's not to say Talia from the Unity Party will accept you, but that is to say it's worth putting your name out there if you're willing to put in the time. So I said, brother, you want to get my John Hancock? And that is short for signature. I learned that in a commercial. But John Hancock, I believe, signed the Declaration of Independence, so it was a rather beautiful pun. It was rather punny there. And he said, actually, yes, I need you to sign it just like it's on your ID driver's license. I said, well, that's a tall task, because what if it's not perfect? And so he critiqued my John Hancock, and he said, well, that's not exact. I think your whoops go up a little higher, your swooshes and your signature go up a little higher. I said, well, we can't all be perfect, brother. I think that's one of the marks of the Unity Party. We're not aiming to be perfect. We're aiming to create a nation and a world where life can flourish. And that doesn't take perfection. That takes effort, my friends. Effort. Well, anyway, we vote. It was beautiful. I just encourage you, you're going to get the opportunity in November to vote if you're an American citizen. I'm not totally certain the timelines on the Canadians and our 1% Dubai listeners. We do have 1% of you listening. And I believe 0.8% of you are French, so that's something to be celebrated. And we appreciate you for that. But make your voice heard. Voting, you can look at that and say, my vote doesn't matter. One vote does not matter. And the optimist would say, oh, of course it does. What if one vote changes the landscape of everything? That's a big what if. That's like, what if winning the lottery? What if one Powerball wins you the lottery? That is an option. I think the more appropriate way in the follower of the Lord's realm would be the Lord, through government, ordained operation by God, has given you a voice to enact the things of Christ, the things that would push people toward the Lord. And if you are not stewarding that in every opportunity you have, that's voting. That is your literal words. That is what you do with your hands and feet. That is how you operate, how you treat others. If you are not doing that in every sense that the Lord has given you the capacity to do it in, I think we are giving great ground for the enemy to work. It's like if I could give you a 15% return on investment in a stock market, for certain, you would 100% put that in the stock market. The Lord has entrusted us, followers of the Lord, with a voice to enact the things of the Lord that we believe that the Lord is moving us toward. And so vote your convictions. I'm not here to tell you what your convictions should be, but I am here to tell you that you should be convicted to use the voice that the Lord has given you. So I feel like I'm coming off pretty hard and harshly in this podcast. I think I'm talking to myself more than anything. I don't want you to walk away or drive away from this podcast and think, man, Rodrigo really hates you. No, this comes from a place of deep and generous love. And I think love knows no bounds from an eternal perspective. Love is true. Love is grace. It's both. And you have to tell people the truth, and you have to tell it in a gracious way. Jesus sets the model for this. He is a man of conviction, and he is a man of great grace. One might say he models those perfectly, and I would agree with whoever might say that. And so just to encourage you, model that after the Lord as much as you can. You're not going to do it perfectly because you are a sinner. And that calls us back to straight dependence on God. And straight, hey God, I can't do this on my own. You've built something that I want to be a part of. I do not need to understand every single piece that you are wanting to accomplish. I just want to be a willing vessel, hands and feet for what you want to do. And more importantly, I believe God and Jesus wants us to be the son and daughter of God. And I think that is the ultimate route that we have to get to, is people pleasing. And I've been thinking about this. I have a tendency to want to God please. And I think that's a good thing, but it can be an idol. God, I just want to gain your pleasure. I just want to please you. That's not what God is calling us to do. That is us trying to earn the pleasure of God through work. God, I just want to be your son. I want to be a good son, a humble son that is willing to ask you, how in the world do I scramble eggs? How in the world do I turn the steering wheel? That's a God that will answer you. We have a God that will just walk alongside of you. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. This is just what the Lord has put on my heart, but this is rather spiritual. But we have to get to the root. Just like the maintenance man got to the root of the German cockroaches, we have to get to the root of our sin. We have to get to the root of why we do the things that we do. And then we have to ask the Lord, 1, to reveal, 2, to remove, and 3, to tend, repair. And if we're not willing to pick up the shovel to do some of that work, we can't expect God to move on our behalf if we're just like, God, do this, but I'm not willing to do it with you. That's really not what the Lord has called us to do. Again, that's been on my mind. I believe that you, my friend, are a remarkable person. This is why I'm sharing what I'm sharing. And if you just want to talk about these things, you have questions about these things, we'd encourage you to reach out to Rodrigo in the chat boards, comment on the show, share it with a friend if you think this is a good discussion. We'd love to talk more with you. Leave us a review if it's good. Don't leave us a review if it's bad. But always buy some merch, because that is how we bring this through the roots of the grass. And so that's why we do this podcast, is because we believe that you are remarkable. We have something that's exciting coming up in the future. It could be 2 calendar years from now, could be 4 calendar years from now, but just be on the lookout for that thing. But in the meantime, we're going to keep showing up each week. We're going to see you very soon, because we love you deeply and generously. And that's why we will see you in 7 days.